So the Xbox Series might be joined in by a couple more consoles here in the near future. Right now we do have the Series S and the Series X, but according to a new leak, that might not be all, and from what it sounds like, Xbox might keep the most powerful console on the market moniker after all. Also, we got some more news about Final Fantasy 16. I mean, there's just been so much discussion about whether or not this game has been a success for Square Enix. And, well, we did get an update that kind of clears some of that stuff up, which we'll dive into today. As always, though, do hit those buttons below. Like and subscribe. It does help out the channel a ton, but without further ado, let's just go and jump right into it. Starting off with Pokemon Presents. Now, I'd like to tell you all that this was a great event. I'd really like to be able to tell you all that, but the truth is, it wasn't. Mostly, this centered around mobile games, which I don't think is really all that surprising. They have a lot of mobile games by this point, but the two big announcements here were some new Nintendo Switch Online games and then also an update for Scarlet and Violet. Now, we'll get into that in just a moment, but unfortunately, we are still waiting for some of those mainline entries. That hasn't changed, but we are getting one step closer to Switch Online being a dream service for Pokemon fans as they announce both the trading card game and Pokemon Stadium 2. Both of these are available today, though do keep in mind that Pokemon Stadium 2 is only available for Expansion Plus subscribers. These really are great additions, though. I think especially when it comes to Pokemon Stadium 2, this is a game that I have very fond memories of when I was a kid. I mean, it's basically just Pokemon battles, but for home consoles, or at least back in the day, with some mini games thrown in as well. I definitely recommend checking this one out if you're a Pokemon fan. It's one of the more beloved spin-offs for a very good reason. Then they also finally revealed the release date for the first Scarlet and Violet expansion, the Till Mask. It will be out next month on September 13th, so this is like right around the corner, which truthfully, and this is just me, but the way they announced this today kind of left me a little bit annoyed. I mean, they showed some new gameplay, which I think looks good. There's a lot of new monsters, including a weird version of Raikou. But the problem I have with the DLC is that they still have yet to mention a performance patch. This is honestly getting ridiculous by this point. These games have been out for almost an entire year, and we've heard absolutely nothing about a performance patch since they first pledged to fix it. I mean, what happened with that original apology? Instead, we're getting paid DLC before we get a performance patch. I mean, you can kind of take that how you want, but to me, this is a slap to the face. I love the Pokemon games, and I really want to return to Scarlet and Violet with this DLC, but I have to say, the DLC is less enticing to me without this patch. If anything, I think that there should be more transparency than what they've given to fans, but I mean, I guess we'll see how this plays out. Maybe they'll announce an update closer to the DLC's release date, but by this point, the joke that it won't be fixed until the Switch 2 is, I mean, it's starting to look a little bit more realistic. I'm still hopeful, but we'll see. Now, here's something really interesting, though. The Steam Deck just got even more affordable because Valve is now offering refurbished models that you can buy on Steam, and this is actually a very good deal compared to the original pricing. So you can now get the 64GB model for $320. The 256GB model is $420, and then the premium 512GB model is $520. Now, I'll go and include the original pricing on screen here, that way you can compare them, but this is a deep discount for all three options. I mean, the fact that you can get the 64GB option for less than the Nintendo Switch OLED is, I mean, that's pretty incredible. Now, if you do go in that direction, though, I'd recommend installing your own SSD. You can actually do that cheaper than buying some of the more expensive models. But the Steam Deck, I mean, it continues to be a highly enticing option, in part thanks to both its pricing combined with its optimization. I mean, if you are on the market for a PC handheld device like this, the Steam Deck's optimization really is one of its main selling points. Now, with that said, though, I am curious as to what kind of quality you'll get with these refurbished models coming from Valve. I'd I'd expect high quality, but I can't really be for sure until we start hearing different impressions. What I know for myself is that a refurbished experience can be very hit or miss. Nintendo, as an example, they do a phenomenal job. You're basically buying something brand new when it comes from them. I actually got a refurbished new 2DS from them, and I mean, it was spotless, but I mean, I've also seen other companies really falter here, so you might want to wait for impressions, but still, this is a great option to have if you want to save some money on the Steam Deck. Speaking of hardware, though, let's go and talk about Xbox, because it sounds like they do have big plans over the next couple years, as a new leak points to them giving fans even more options. Now, this is coming from Special Nick, which I know a lot of people trust him within the community, and according to him on the Xbox Era podcast, he said that Xbox has plans for a digital Xbox Series X, and there are also plans for quote-unquote other hardware in 2025. Now, we'll come back to that here in just a second, because I think that's the real exciting news here. But this digital Xbox Series X is a very smart option. Honestly, I'm a little surprised we haven't seen a digital edition yet. I suspect some of that is because they prioritize building out their Xbox Series X cloud farm. Personally, I still find that to be a big mistake, but nonetheless, we have seen Sony have success with their digital PlayStation 5 at $400. In today's world, not everybody wants a disc drive, so having a cheaper option is very enticing. The majority of the software now is being sold digitally, so it really just kind of depends on the person. I mean, for myself, I'm physical all the way, but I'm all for options, especially if it can decrease the price. If Xbox can do the same thing as PlayStation and offer a digital Xbox Series X for $400, that's a huge discount that I'm sure a lot of customers would heavily consider. It would really be a good middle ground between the Xbox Series S at $300 and then the Xbox Series X at $500. If they could put that right in the middle for $400, this would be a great option for consumers. Right now, though, what's kind of happening is that for those fans that want a more powerful Xbox, they're being forced to buy an Xbox Series X with a disc drive, and truth be told, there's probably some people out there that just doesn't use it at all. For that matter, with the increased importance of Xbox Game Pass, that's a whole library in its own that's completely digital. So a digital Xbox Series X would actually lean into the affordability of Xbox Game Pass. I mean, here you have Xbox Game Pass, which is viewed as the best deal in the market. It'll have a large library of digital games from Starfield to possibly Call of Duty in the future, all of which will be included day one. And then to be able to lower that introductory fee for their premium console would be a huge attraction for the Xbox ecosystem. So I think this is an absolute no-brainer for Xbox. A digital Xbox Series X makes complete sense. Now, however, for those that already have an Xbox Series X, this is kind of where the quote-unquote other hardware comes in. Nick mentioned that this is being planned for 2025, and he didn't really go into great detail as to exactly what he was talking about, so it could be in reference for something else, but, you know, just knowing how last generation unfolded, could this possibly be for an Xbox Series X Pro model, the Xbox Series Z, or whatever you want to call it? Is it possible that they'll do the exact same thing that they did last generation, where they released the Xbox One X 1 year after the PlayStation 4 Pro? Now, I have speculated on multiple occasions that this is exactly what they'll do, and now here we're hearing this rumor, which kind of props that up. It would make a lot of sense. Now, I understand that Phil Spencer previously suggested that they won't do a Pro model anytime soon, but he's certainly not going to say that in some kind of public random interview. I mean, why would he announce something 2 years in advance which would cripple the current consoles in the market? It just wouldn't make any sense, so I don't really look at his statement as some type of confirmation. The truth is, console manufacturers are always toying around with new hardware ideas. These consoles, they don't just get slapped together last minute. There's a lot of preparation that goes into this type of stuff. It takes years of development, and I imagine Xbox probably at the very least has looked at the idea of doing another Pro model. Now, whether or not that actually comes to fruition is a completely different story. But if they release a PlayStation 5 Pro next year, as is currently rumored, well, then Xbox, they might want to then respond. One of their big selling points for the Xbox Series X is that they can claim that it's the most powerful console on paper, and they might lose that next year depending on what Sony does. So Xbox might look to respond if that turns out to be true, which I fully expect that it will. Tom Henderson has proven to be a reliable leaker in the past, so when he says a PlayStation 5 Pro is coming next year, I think that there's reasons to believe that. I think the only thing about these Pro models, though, is that it'll be difficult to market them. Last generation was a little bit different because they were able to market 4K resolution as their big selling point. But when it comes to this generation, I feel like it's going to be a little bit more difficult to market them. I'd expect this generation's Pro models to just get more consistent 4K and 60 frames per second. I mean, I'm sure that they'll talk about ray tracing and 8K resolution, and they'll have some different buzzwords like that thrown in as well. But I'd expect the most realistic upgrade to be a more consistent 4K and 60 frames for games like Final Fantasy 16 and Jedi Survivor, or on Xbox's side, maybe Starfield. I want to hear what you all think about this, though. Does either one of these consoles actually interest you? And for that matter, what's the most you'd be willing to spend for an Xbox Series X Pro or a PlayStation 5 Pro? Now, we also got another update for Final Fantasy 16, and there's been a lot of mixed reactions for this game, and I'm not talking about quality. Personally, I think this is a great game. In my opinion, it's very possibly the best single-player Final Fantasy game since maybe Final Fantasy 9. So honestly, I really like 16, but the big question continues to be, was it a success or not? Now, we talked a little bit about this last week because Square Enix posted their fiscal year results and their profits plummeted. It was bad. And Square stock also plummeted over the weekend. So investors are clearly not happy with the results, but we got a little bit more of an explanation today as to why some of this happened. The reason their profits were so low is reportedly because Square Enix decided to pay for Final Fantasy 16's development in full this quarter, which impacted their results. Now, the reason they did this is because it puts Final Fantasy 16 in a position to be profitable with every unit sold from this point forward. In other words, future reports will look a lot better for Square Enix. However, we also got a report from Bloomberg which states that Square's president in an earnings call said Final Fantasy 16 did not meet their high-end expectations and that apparently the PlayStation 5's install base is the limiting factor. This is according to 3 different people who attended the earnings call. Not 1, not 2, but 3 sources gave Bloomberg this information. Now, I point that out because some people online are kind of refusing to believe this report, but it's really not that bad. Basically, what this report says is that it sold good, but not necessarily great, which kind of lines up with what we previously knew. See, here's the thing. People look at us selling 3 million units in a week's time, and, that's really good for most games, and that's what people kind of see. But what Square's looking at, and why they're saying it didn't meet their high-end expectations, is because it's selling slower than Final Fantasy 15 and 7 Remake. 16, it cost a lot of money, and they were probably hoping that it would sell a little bit faster, at least on par with Final Fantasy 7 Remake. Now, Square is expecting 16 to pick up over time as the PlayStation 5 continues to sell. I imagine that will be the case as well. But them noting that the PlayStation 5 is the limiting factor is a very interesting choice of words because Square themselves are limiting who can actually play Final Fantasy 16. That's been one of the big topics about this game. Now, at the bare minimum, there's a very real debate that it should have at least launched on PC, and that could have maybe helped them reach their, again, quote-unquote, high-end expectations. It doesn't take much to figure out why Final Fantasy 15 sold faster than both 7 Remake and 16. It was available on more platforms day one. But on more platforms, it'll sell more units. For the time being, though, I do think that this kind of puts this story to rest. Final Fantasy 16 was a success, even if not necessarily a smashing success, or in terms of Square's expectations, which does tend to be a little bit on the higher side of things. Lastly, though, we do have a delay to talk about for the Plunky Squire because it's now officially been pushed into 2024. For me, though, I think that's fine. This game really looks spectacular. I think it's a very creative idea with it going to 2D to 3D. It looks really, really interesting, and I think it has a lot of potential. And for that reason, I want to see them fully realize its potential. There's really no reason to rush this game out. 2023 is already a very, very busy year, as many of us are well aware of, and that's only going to speed up throughout the holiday. Even good indie games can get buried among all of these big AAA releases in the last part of the year. So I think it's actually a very smart thing to look onward into 2024. If anything else, The Plunky Squire right now is already one of the most interesting independent games set for 2024. Let's go take a look at the poll of the day, though. We're asked you all, will you return to Killer Instinct later this year once it's updated? And well, apparently, a combined 50% of you all are indeed interested, most of which are returning fans, but hey, I'm happy to see that there's a small portion of you willing to give it a try at the very least, and I'm telling you right now, this is one of the best fighting games ever made. It's easily one of my favorite 2D fighters out there, and I'm super excited to jump back in. Now, we do still need to see what they have planned. We don't exactly have much details yet, but what I really want from this is for this to kind of be a new chapter for Killer Instinct. I mean, I'd love to see this game get supported for years and years to come with new characters and updates, but, you know, even if this is just an update, I still think that that's incredibly exciting just because of how good this game truly is. I'm really excited to see more people jump in this year. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode. But if you liked the video, don't forget the bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.